I used to believe that love meant never asking questions. That was my first mistake. The alarm screamed at 5 a.m., same as it had for the past 15 years. I rolled out of bed without hitting snooze, muscle memory guiding me through the darkness to the bathroom, where I splashed cold water on my face and stared at the man in the mirror. 42 years old, graying at the temples, shoulders that ached from loading trucks all day. Still strong, still willing to work double shifts when Angela mentioned something else we needed. Angela was still sleeping, her dark hair spread across the pillow like silk. Even after all these years, she was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that made other men look twice in grocery stores, made waitresses give me that pitying smile that said, "How did you manage that?" I'd kiss her forehead before leaving for work, careful not to wake her. She needed her sleep. Taking care of the house was exhausting, she always said. The warehouse was 20 minutes away, and I knew every pothole on that route. I'd been driving it since Angela and I got married, back when I thought providing meant everything, when I believed that if I just worked hard enough, loved quietly enough, sacrificed completely enough, I could build us the kind of life she deserved. My immigrant father had taught me that men showed love through work, through never complaining, through putting your family's needs before your own comfort. So I worked. Double shifts when they offered them, overtime whenever possible. When Angela mentioned wanting new furniture, I picked up weekend work. When she needed a better car, I sold my motorcycle. When she wanted to redecorate the living room for the third time in 5 years, I smiled and handed over my credit card. That's what love looked like, I thought. That's what devotion meant. But lately, something had been changing. Small things at first. The way Angela would dress up for her visits to her sister Maria, putting on makeup and perfume like she was going somewhere special instead of just hanging out with family. The way she'd come home with shopping bags despite our conversations about saving money. The way she'd grown distant and irritable in the days leading up to each trip to Maria's place, like she was somewhere else in her mind. "I need to visit Maria this weekend," she'd announced 3 nights ago, not looking up from her phone. "She's having problems with the kids again." I'd nodded, same as always. Of course. Take whatever you need. But this time, the familiar knot in my stomach felt different, tighter, more insistent. I found myself watching her pack, noting how carefully she folded the new lingerie I'd never seen before, how she packed 3 times as many clothes as she'd need for a weekend visit. When she kissed me goodbye Friday morning, her lips felt rehearsed, like she was performing for an audience. "I'll be back Sunday evening," she said, already turning away. I watched her drive away in the Honda I'd bought her last year, watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner, and for the first time in 15 years of marriage, I decided to trust my gut instead of my heart. That's when I made the decision. Tomorrow, Saturday, I would drive to Maria's house. The 2-hour drive to Maria's house on Saturday morning felt like driving toward my own execution. Every mile marker brought me closer to either relief or devastation, and I couldn't decide which outcome I was hoping for. Maybe Angela really was at her sister's place. Maybe I was just being paranoid, letting work stress and middle-age insecurity poison my marriage. But deep down, I knew better. I'd always liked Maria. Where Angela was beautiful and high maintenance, Maria was practical and hard-working. She raised 3 kids alone after her husband left, worked 2 jobs to keep them fed and clothed, never complained about her circumstances. When we did visit, which was rare, now that I thought about it, Maria would always ask about my work, thank me for taking care of Angela, treat me like family. She had the same dark eyes as her sister, but hers held warmth instead of calculation. That was the word that had been nagging at me for months. Calculation. The way Angela timed her requests for money just after I'd gotten paid. The way she'd grown affectionate right before mentioning something expensive she wanted. The way she'd disappear for entire weekends, claiming family obligation, then return refreshed and distant, like she'd been somewhere that recharged her batteries. I rehearsed the conversation in my head as highway mile markers ticked by. "Hey, Maria. I wanted to surprise Angela. Thought I'd drive up and take you both out to dinner." Simple, reasonable, loving. If Angela was really there, we'd have a nice evening together. If she wasn't, the knot in my stomach tightened. I thought about the last time we'd been intimate, really intimate, not just the mechanical coupling that had become our routine. It had been months. Angela always had excuses, tired, stressed, worried about money. But now I wondered if there was another reason, if someone else was satisfying needs I thought were mine alone to meet. Maria's house sat at the end of a quiet street in a working-class neighborhood, small but well-maintained. Her old Nissan was in the driveway, but I didn't see Angela's Honda anywhere. Maybe she'd parked it elsewhere. Maybe she'd run to the store. Maybe. I knocked on the front door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maria opened it with a smile that immediately crumbled into confusion. "Carlos? What are you doing here?" "I wanted to surprise Angela," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "Thought I'd drive up and take you both out to dinner." The confusion on Maria's face deepened, then shifted into something that looked like pity. "Carlos, Angela's not here." "Did she run to the store? I can wait." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "No, Carlos. She hasn't been here in months. I thought you knew she stopped visiting." The world tilted. Not shock, exactly. Some part of me had been expecting this. But the confirmation hit like a physical blow, cold and clarifying and absolute. My wife of 15 years had been lying to me, systematically, elaborately, for months. "I'm so sorry," Maria whispered, reaching out to touch my arm. "I should have called you. I should have said something when she stopped coming. But I thought maybe you two were having problems. Maybe she needed space." "What did she tell you?" My voice sounded calm, controlled. I was surprised by how steady it was. Maria looked away. "She used to complain sometimes, about feeling stuck, about wanting more excitement in her life, about..." She stopped, unwilling to wound me further. "About me?" I asked. "Carlos, you're a good man. You work hard. You provide for her. You never raise your voice or cause trouble. Any woman would be lucky." "Thank you," I interrupted gently. "Thank you for telling me the truth." I walked back to my car on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Maria called after me, offering coffee, offering to talk, but I just waved and got behind the wheel. I sat there for a moment, engine running, staring at the house where my wife wasn't and never had been on those weekends. Then I put the car in drive and began the journey home. Not the same man who had left that morning. This was someone who had been betrayed. Someone who now understood the difference between love and stupidity. Someone who was done being grateful for scraps of affection from a woman who saw his devotion as weakness to exploit. The drive home felt shorter somehow. Maybe because I finally knew where I was going. The house felt different when I walked in Saturday afternoon. Same furniture, same pictures on the walls, same faint scent of Angela's perfume lingering in the air. But now, I saw it all clearly. The expensive throw pillows I'd bought without question, the artwork she'd insisted we needed, the credit card bills I'd paid without examining too closely. Evidence of my own willful blindness. I sat in my recliner, the one piece of furniture that was truly mine, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: clarity. For the first time since our wedding day, I wasn't reacting to Angela's needs or wants or moods. I was thinking for myself. Sunday morning, I called in sick to work. First time in over 3 years. My supervisor sounded genuinely concerned. Carlos Mendoza didn't miss shifts, didn't call in, didn't put his own needs above the job. But this was bigger than work. This was about rebuilding my life on a foundation of truth instead of delusion. By noon, I was sitting across from Sarah. divorce attorney. I'd found her online, read reviews from other working-class men who'd been taken advantage of by wives who saw marriage as a meal ticket. Sarah was sharp, professional, and brutally honest about my situation. "You're in a better position than most men who come to me," she said, reviewing the paperwork I'd brought. "House is in your name alone, purchased before marriage. She has no employment history to claim spousal support. Ohio's no-fault divorce laws actually protect you here since you've been the sole provider." The legal strategy was surprisingly simple. Ohio recognized the difference between marital and separate property. Since Angela had never contributed financially and the house predated our marriage, she had no claim to it. Her lack of employment history meant no alimony. I'd probably have to give her half of the money in our joint checking account, about $3,000, and maybe split some of the newer furniture, but that was all. "What about her lies?" I asked. "The affair?" "Ohio is no fault," Sarah explained. "Adultery doesn't affect property division, but it does give us leverage if she tries to drag this out or make unreasonable demands." I signed the retainer agreement and authorized her to prepare divorce papers for service. The act felt decisive, final, like crossing a bridge I'd been afraid to approach for years. As I wrote the check, I realized this was the first major financial decision I'd made in our marriage without considering Angela's opinion first. Driving home, I called my mother for the first time in months. Angela had always found reasons to avoid family gatherings. My relatives were too loud, too traditional, too judgmental of her lifestyle. Gradually, I'd stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped maintaining relationships that had sustained me before marriage. "Mijo," my mother said when I told her about the divorce, "I've been waiting years for you to wake up." That evening, I cleaned the house thoroughly, cooked myself a proper meal, and waited. Not with anxiety or dread, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had finally stopped being a victim. Angela would return Sunday evening with her lies and her stories and her performance, but this time I'd be ready. I was done being grateful for crumbs, done accepting blame for her unhappiness, done pretending that love meant never asking questions. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the man who'd driven to Maria's house yesterday, desperate for answers. I was someone who already had them, someone who'd decided what came next. Angela returned Sunday evening with shopping bags and stories, her performance so polished it was almost insulting. She breezed through the door talking about lunch with Maria, a spa day they'd supposedly shared, even showed me a small bottle of cologne she claimed to have bought me at a shop near Maria's house. "You should have seen Maria's face when I told her about your promotion possibility," she said, hanging up her coat. "She's so proud of how hard you work." I let her perform, taking mental notes of each fabrication. The ease with which she lied was almost fascinating. Clinical, rehearsed, delivered with just enough detail to seem authentic, but not enough to be verified. She'd clearly had months to perfect this routine. "How was your weekend?" she asked, settling onto the couch with the casual comfort of someone who believed her deception was complete. "Quiet. Caught up on some projects around the house." She nodded absently, already scrolling through her phone. This was our new normal, brief, surface conversations while she lived her real life elsewhere. I wondered how long she'd been planning to leave me, or if she even planned to leave at all. Maybe I was just the safety net, the reliable provider who kept her comfortable while she found excitement elsewhere. "I was thinking," she said, not looking up from her screen, "Maria might need me to visit more often. She's really struggling with the kids, and I think I'm the only family she has who can help." The audacity was breathtaking. Not only was she lying about where she'd been, she was already setting up her next deception. How many more weekends of lies had she planned? How long did she think she could maintain this double life? "That's generous of you," I said calmly. She smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen since she'd walked in. "You're so understanding, Carlos." Most husbands would be jealous of all the time I spend helping family. I made dinner while she unpacked, asked gentle questions about her weekend, even complimented the new clothes she was wearing. Clothes I now realized had been bought for someone else's enjoyment. Angela relaxed into her familiar role, complaining about Maria's financial problems, making subtle digs about how I worked too much, building toward her real agenda. "I was thinking of visiting again next weekend," she said over dinner. "Maria asked if I could help her with some job applications, and I hate to see her struggle." "Of course," I replied. "Whatever she needs." After dinner, Angela settled in to watch television, comfortable and secure in her deception. She'd successfully manipulated me for months, convinced me to fund her double life while making me feel grateful for the privilege. The woman I'd worked double shifts to support, the woman I'd sacrificed my own comfort and friendships to please, had been laughing at my devotion while living her real life with another man. I waited until she was completely relaxed, until she'd stopped performing and become simply herself. Selfish, entitled, comfortable in her control over me. Then I walked to the kitchen, retrieved the envelope Sarah Chen had prepared, and returned to the living room. "Angela," I said quietly. She looked up from her phone with mild irritation, annoyed to be interrupted. I handed her the envelope. "I talked to your sister yesterday. You haven't been there in 2 months. This marriage is over. Get out of my house." The change in her face was instant, confusion shifting to shock, then to something like panic as she tore open the envelope and saw the divorce papers. She read quickly, her face going pale, then looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Carlos, what is this? What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I pressed. She tried tears first. "Baby, I don't understand. Did Maria say something? She must have been confused, maybe." "Angela, stop," I said. The firmness in my voice seemed to surprise her. She'd never heard me speak with absolute authority before, never seen me refuse to be moved by her emotions. "You've been lying to me for months. You've been somewhere else with someone else, spending money I work 16-hour days to earn. I know about the affair. I know about all of it." She switched tactics, tears becoming anger. "You had me followed? You've been spying on me? I've been trying to understand why my wife has been lying to my face every weekend for months. I never... Stop lying to me." The words came out louder than I'd intended, but they felt good, liberating. I'm done listening to lies. I'm done pretending this marriage is something it isn't. I'm done being grateful for scraps of attention from someone who sees my love as weakness. Angela's performance crumbled. The tears, the confusion, the outrage, all of it fell away, leaving something harder and colder underneath. "Fine," she said. "You want to know the truth? Yes, I've been seeing someone who makes me feel alive, who doesn't bore me to death talking about overtime pay and home repairs. Someone who understands that I need more than this suffocating small life you've built for us." The words should have hurt. She'd designed them to wound, to make me feel inadequate, to regain control through emotional devastation. But instead, I felt only relief. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Thank you for finally telling me the truth. Now I know this decision is right." Her face changed again. She'd expected pain, rage, jealousy, emotions she could manipulate. My calm acceptance terrified her because it meant she'd lost all leverage. "Carlos, wait. Let's talk about this. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. I'll stop seeing him. "No," I replied. "You can't just throw away 15 years of marriage." "I'm not throwing it away. You already did that," I replied. She tried everything then. Promises, threats, bargaining, emotional blackmail. She threatened to take half of everything, claimed she'd been unhappy for years, accused me of driving her to cheat through neglect and emotional unavailability. Every weapon in her arsenal, deployed with desperate precision. But I'd prepared for this. Sarah Chen had given me armor against Angela's emotional warfare, and more importantly, I'd finally seen through the illusion that had controlled me for years. This woman had never loved me. She'd loved what I provided, the security I represented, the comfortable life my labor had built. But me, Carlos, the man who got up at 5 a.m. and worked until his back ached, who'd sacrificed his own dreams to fund hers, I'd been invisible to her. "I want you out of the house tonight," I said when her tirade finally ended. "Pack whatever you need. We can arrange a time for you to get the rest of your things." "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "That's not my problem anymore," I replied. She stared at me like I was a stranger, and maybe I was. The man she'd married, eager to please, grateful for attention, willing to sacrifice everything for her approval, was gone. In his place stood someone who understood his own worth, someone who refused to be anyone's safety net or consolation prize. Angela packed 2 suitcases in angry silence, slamming drawers and muttering under her breath about ungrateful men and wasted years. When she was done, she stood in the doorway looking back at the house she'd never really appreciated, the life she'd taken for granted. "You'll regret this," she said. "No," I replied. "I regret not doing it sooner." The garden was taking shape nicely. Elena had suggested tomatoes and peppers along the back fence, herbs in the raised bed near the kitchen window. She had good instincts about what would grow well in Ohio soil, about what was worth the effort to cultivate. "Hand me that trowel," she asked, not looking up from the seedlings she was transplanting. Saturday evening, working together in the backyard of the house that was finally starting to feel like home again. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this. Peace, partnership, someone who appreciated my steady nature instead of taking it for granted. Angela was gone. Not just from the house, but from my entire emotional landscape. I knew what had happened to her through the inevitable small-town gossip network, how Maria had refused to take her in after learning about the lies, how her affair partner had turned out to be less interested in supporting her financially than in enjoying her company on weekends, how she'd been forced to take a job waitressing at Denny's just to afford a studio apartment across town. But those details felt distant, irrelevant, ancient history from a life I'd outgrown. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Angela had tried to drag it out, hoping I'd change my mind or offer a settlement to avoid the hassle. But Sarah Chen had been right. Without employment history or claim to the house, Angela had no leverage. She'd gotten half the checking account balance and some of the newer furniture. Everything else stayed with me. I'd been promoted to assistant warehouse manager in January. Turned out that 15 years of perfect attendance and uncomplaining overtime had been noticed by people who mattered. The raise wasn't huge, but it was enough to start saving for the future Elena and I were planning together. Elena was different from Angela in every way that mattered. She worked as a nurse at the county hospital, understood long hours and physical exhaustion, appreciated coming home to someone who cooked dinner and asked about her day. She was pretty in a natural way, no expensive makeup or designer clothes required, and she laughed at my jokes even when they weren't particularly funny. Most importantly, she saw me. Not what I could provide or buy or build, but me, Carlos, the man who got up early and worked hard and tried to do right by the people he cared about. She made me feel valued instead of used, appreciated instead of taken for granted. "I ran into Maria at the grocery store yesterday," Elena said, wiping dirt from her hands. "She asked about you, wanted to make sure you were doing okay." I nodded. Maria and I had talked a few times since the divorce, mostly her apologizing for not speaking up during the marriage. I harbored no resentment toward her. She'd been caught between loyalty to her sister and sympathy for me, an impossible position. When she'd finally told me the truth, it had set me free. "Did she mention Angela?" I asked. "She moved away last month, following that man to Indianapolis, apparently." Maria seemed relieved. I felt nothing hearing this news. Not satisfaction or revenge or even curiosity about whether Angela would find the excitement she'd been seeking. She'd become like weather from a previous season, something that had happened but no longer affected the temperature of my days. The promotion had come with better health insurance, and Elena and I had talked about marriage, about kids, about buying a bigger house where we could raise a family properly. Not the desperate dreaming of someone trying to win love through sacrifice, but the practical planning of two adults who'd found genuine partnership. Elena stood up, brushing soil from her knees. "I should get dinner started. Your mother's calling at 7, right?" I'd reconnected with my family after the divorce, started having regular Sunday dinners with my mother and brother again. Elena fit in perfectly. She spoke enough Spanish to complement my mother's cooking. Didn't mind the loud conversations about work and politics and neighborhood gossip that had always made Angela uncomfortable. "She wants to know if we've set a date yet," I said. Elena smiled. "Have we? October? After the garden's finished producing?" "October sounds perfect," I replied. I looked around the backyard, vegetables growing in neat rows, herbs thriving in the afternoon sun, 2 lawn chairs positioned to catch the evening light. This was what happiness looked like. Quiet, productive, built on truth instead of illusion. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Angela, probably, reaching out from Indianapolis with some crisis or emotional manipulation. I deleted it without reading it. That part of my life was over, filed away under lessons learned and mistakes I wouldn't repeat. Elena was in the kitchen now, humming while she cooked. Through the window, I could see her moving around the space that had been transformed from Angela's showcase into a place where actual meals were prepared and shared. No more expensive gadgets that never got used. No more decorative items that couldn't be touched. Just the tools of daily life, organized by someone who understood that a home was for living in. I used to believe that love meant never asking questions. Now I knew that love meant never having to. Real love, the kind Elena and I were building, thrived on honesty and mutual respect and the simple pleasure of working together toward shared goals. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across the garden we'd planted together. Tomorrow I'd water the tomatoes before leaving for work, check the peppers for signs of growth, maybe add some mulch around the herbs. Small acts of care, tending something that would provide nourishment for months to come. That was the difference between building and taking, between love and exploitation. Angela had been a taker, someone who consumed what others created without contributing anything of lasting value. Elena was a builder, someone who understood that the best things in life required patience, effort, and mutual investment. I was grateful for the betrayal now, not because it hadn't hurt, but because it had freed me to find someone who deserved my devotion. Someone who saw my quiet strength as a gift instead of a weakness to exploit. The garden would be beautiful this fall. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.